Greetings, folks. Iolair here. I hope everyone has had a good first few days of 2020, and I'm very pleased to present to you the first division replay of the year for the channel, featuring a trio of tier-VIII German ships. We have myself in the destroyer Z-23, Jimijaz in the premium cruiser, the Prinz Eugen, and Lynn Wilkie in the mighty Bismarck. We are in a tier-VIII domination match on neighbors with one tier-VI aircraft carrier per team, and there are also lots of battleships on each side. Now, Lynn's Bismarck is commanded by the new legendary German commander Günther Lütjens. He has a blend of secondaries and survivability. Lynn does not prescribe to using manual secondaries. I think he prefers to have his secondaries go off on both sides of his ship. Jimijaz's build in the Prinz Eugen focuses on endurance and AA. This is the commander from his Hindenburg. And then my build in the Z-23 focuses on survivability, late game support with Superintendent, as well as radio location for area and cap control. Now, this match is going to go the full 20 minutes. It's going to be a very close match right up to the end. So hopefully I keep your interest for the next 20 minutes as we start off from, we originally started from Lynn Wilkie's perspective in the Bismarck. We've switched over here to Jimijaz's perspective in the Prinz Eugen as he's getting in some very long-range gunnery against his counterpart on the other side in the other Prinz Eugen. But as I think my regular viewers know, I'm a strong believer in an Alpha and Bravo strategy on neighbors. And I have moved in, myself in the Z-23, I've moved into the Bravo cap. And we're going to switch to my perspective here in just a moment. But Jimijaz and Lynn Wilkie are trying to coax at least a significant portion of the team down to the Bravo and Alpha areas. We have switched over to Lynn Wilkie's perspective in the Bismarck with his opening salvo landing a nice Citadel hit on the Algerie. We'll come back to the Algerie a little bit later, actually quite a few times. We switched over to my perspective in the Z-23. Now, I have smoked up here because I don't want to get reset by the carrier, but I'm also committing kind of a cardinal sin in my book. Obviously I'm denying my team some spotting, which is important. The other thing I'm doing is that by camping and smoke, I'm just inviting torpedoes. And here comes the Minsk. And Jimijaz had reminded me that I should probably be popping Hydro, which I did. And that's what lit up the Minsk. And Minsk and I are going to go and have sort of a torpedo jousting session here. And his torpedoes are going to miss, and I'm going to land 4 right on his stern. But I do take him out. But it did take 4 torpedoes, so that's probably a reflection of damage saturation on his stern before I was able to finish him off. And now I'm going to be able to finish capping Bravo. So please do as I say and not as I did, and don't sit in your smoke. And if you can at all avoid it, and in particular with German destroyers which have Hydro, they really don't have a reason to not be able to detect an opposing destroyer that might be trying to ambush them and smoke. We switched over to Jimijaz's perspective in the Prinz Eugen as he's moved over to the Alpha cap. Obviously here trying to avoid some torpedoes coming in, which do expire. But he is going to try to help me in the Z-23, coax the large force that we have at Alpha now that we've secured the cap to push through the cap. So the plan here right now that we've secured Alpha and Bravo is to have myself and the Z-23 head south and have Jimijaz help me sort of coax the team through the Alpha cap and get back into the mid so that we can maintain control in the mid. Now, and then the other part of our plan here is Lynn has headed north to try to slow and bolster the north flank, since that is where the opponents have sent most of their firepower. At least their big guns, and Lynn is going to try to help sort of contain or at least slow the large force that the opponents have moving through Charlie. Now we have sunk 2 of the 3 destroyers, and there our allied Jervis is able to finish off the 3rd of the opposing destroyers. So we were thinking at this point, okay, we've got 2 caps to the opponent's none. We've taken out all of their destroyers, and as Lin lands another Citadel hit, this time on the Fuso. So at this point, we were thinking, okay, we've gotten off to a pretty good start. Now we switched over to my perspective in the Z23 as, again, I've moved over to the Alpha Cap to not only provide some spotting, although we do have a Gnevny here, but also my long-range torps allow me to sort of corral and push back the opponents more effectively than the Gnevny could. So my role or my intention at this point is to try to push the opponents that we do have near Alpha, sort of push them away from the cap, and then I would move back towards Bravo. Now, in the last few seconds, you've noticed that we've lost 2 more ships. Those are both at Charlie, where Lin has headed to. And right now, in fact, we've just switched back to Lin's perspective in the Bismarck. Lin realizes, I think, at this point that he is overextended, in particular because 2 of his allies that were here, the Jervis and I forget what the other ship was, have all been taken out. And so it's just Lin and the Queen Elizabeth, and now's the time that he should be trying to tactically retreat. So he's going to execute what would normally be a very dangerous turn here, which is a dangerous turn, but with a number of the opponents behind the island that can't shoot at him, he's able to limit the number of opponents that are going to be able to shoot on him. Unfortunately, he does take a big salvo here from the Fuso that he citadeled earlier. Lin isn't going to take any citadels, but he is going to take a lot of penetrating damage, and he's now down to less than quarter of his health. And although he is trying to peel away here, I think Lin was at this point realized that he bit off probably a little more than he could chew, especially since, like I said, a couple of our allies were taken out quite recently and Lin became the focus. And he is going to land another Citadel hit on that Algerie that we mentioned earlier, bring him down to just a few thousand hit points, and we are going to see that Algerie again, as unfortunately we do lose Lin in our division. So we switched over to Jimijaz's perspective as, again, he's trying to coax the Mogami that's in Bravo out of the cap so that we can retain the points from that cap. You can see myself in the Z23, which I'm going to switch to here fairly soon. I'm too far west, and this is and in fact, we have switched to my perspective. This is a tactical error on my part. I was okay that I moved to Alpha to try to contain the opponents and sort of push them away from the cap, which I have been able to do. Although I haven't landed any torpedo hits, that's okay. I'm chasing off these battleships. They know that they're being pursued by a destroyer, but frankly, I went too far west. And so now I'm too far from the mid of the cap. So I'm kind of in a race right now to get back to center map, because you can see that we've left Bravo is entirely undefended. The large force of the opponents that were at Charlie have now pushed through that cap. They're now focusing our Queen Elizabeth, which is over on the 10 line. In fact, there will be a comment right here in the chat from the Queen Elizabeth asking our carrier to get moving, which unfortunately he will not. And we will, the opponents will continue to fin. In fact, they've just finished off our carrier, and that's really thinning our presence in the north. And so, like I said, we're kind of in a race now to get back to the center of the map to be able to maintain center map control. Now you can see here that myself in the Z23, I've pinged on the map asking our ships that are in the center to move and confront the force that's coming out of Charlie and not chase the battleships that are headed north. Although it isn't good to have battleships that you're not being able to push off, because they could just put flanking fire on you. Fortunately, we do finish off the opponent's Massachusetts, and our Richelieu here, to his credit, he is acting as sort of a buffer right now against the it was originally against both the Massachusetts and Bismarck, but now it's just the Massachusetts. We do lose the Queen Elizabeth, again, was on the north flank. So we have essentially no representation in the north. And we've been toggling between my perspective and Jimijaz's perspective as we're, engaged in both spotting and gunning situations to try to keep the opponents contained. Jimijaz is trying not to be the focus of the opponents coming out of Charlie. That's why he's working from some fairly significant distance here. And we switch to my perspective because we can see that both the Mogami and the Fuso may attempt, or at least the Fuso may attempt to come back down into Bravo. So I've sent torpedoes into that gap that's on the very north edge of the cap. So we'll keep an eye on those torpedoes. And I've now re-entered Bravos where I can provide continuous spotting of the middle of the map. And I can, again, obviously try to keep the opponents out of the cap and keep them pushed off with torpedo strikes. So things at this point, we have a pretty, well, let's see, we're down by 2 ships. And although we have a fairly substantial point lead, because again, we've been maintaining decent cap control up to this point, but we've just lost so many forces. And you can see here that my torpedoes are going to find their mark on the Fuso, and I am going to finish him off. So we've now brought the deficit down to 1 ship. Although we do have some ships that are, including our Richelieu that you can see that's at Foxtrot 3. He's trying to retreat because he's very wounded, and we are going to lose him any moment here. I think he's on fire, and he's just going to go out. Now, I had originally intended to go after the Bayern. In fact, I am going to go after the Bayern. In fact, there goes the Richelieu that I just mentioned. I had originally intended to make a counterclockwise turn to get my next strike on the Bayern, but I realized that that was going to get me too close to the battleship, and if I were to get detected, then I would be within firing range of at least 3 or 4 ships, some of which we cannot see right now. So I've decided to change my direction and send the other way. Now we've briefly switched to Lynn's perspective as he was watching me, and he's getting a nice close look of this Halloween camo for the Z-23. This is the rat camo, and he was making comments to me that I had some sort of infestation on my ship and I probably should get some cats for my ship. Now we switched over to Jimijaz's perspective as he's continuing to kite the couple of forces that are moved out of Charlie and are now moving towards Bravo. You can see my torpedoes in the Z-23 headed towards the Bayern. We've now switched to my perspective as I am going to get a number of torpedoes on the Bayern, but it's not going to be quite enough to finish them off. And Jimijaz had set a fire on the Bayern immediately before my torpedoes hit. So the Bayern, unfortunately, none of that flooding or fires are going to stick as he had damage control ready to go. So now I'm kind of really desperate to get this Bayern down. You can see I'm making several calls for him to attack. For us to attack the Bayern, I'm asking our New Mexico and our Gnevny to focus more in the middle of the map. Here we switch to Jimijaz's perspective as, again, he's having to try to peel away here and not get focused out by either the Bayern or the Prinz Eugen. But both our Gnevny, which we've now lost to the aircraft carrier, as well as our New Mexico, are not focusing on the objective. They're continuing to chase ships that are on the north edge of the map that are not supporting the objective. We should be focusing the Bayern like Jimijaz and I am right now. We do get another fire on the Bayern. We lose our New Mexico, and that leaves just Jimijaz and me for our team against, right now, is 7 opponents. So things are not looking very good. Now, the Bayern is on fire. His damage control is on cooldown. I've dropped into smoke here to try to get some more cap resets. And I am going to set another fire, which is going to doom the Bayern, although he has obviously gone in concealment because I'm the only thing that could be spotting him at this point. And in fact, you can see that the opposing aircraft carrier is trying to blind drop me right now. There's the Bayern again. I'm going to get another shot in on him. And that's going to set the other fire, reset the cap again, and he is going to burn out here. I don't remember if Jimijaz, or I guess I get the kill. So now I'm going to come under constant aerial attack because I'm really the biggest threat right now in terms of the opponents being able to get Bravo. And at this point, there's nothing we can do to prevent them from taking Bravo. They still have their aircraft carrier. They have 5 other surface ships that can all focus me. There's no way for either of us to be able to get back into that cap. And so I'm kind of in this dodge and weave exercise to try to avoid the drops from the carrier, but also I want to be able to be close enough to get torpedo sends on these opponents and try to keep them back and off the cap. Unfortunately, the Mogami is in Bravo. We can't see him, and that's the right thing for him to do. He's kind of the surrogate destroyer, and he's going to have to take the cap for the team. Now we switch back to Jimijaz's perspective, as he's now going to basically go into one-on-one engagements with, at least initially with the Prince Eugen, but also he's going to get into a one-on-one engagement with the Mogami immediately after. We do lose the Bravo cap. We still do have the lead, and with a what looks like about a 50-point spread, it's going to take them a little over a minute and a half for the opponents to catch up with this on points, provided both Jimijaz and I continue to live. You can see that the carrier continues to focus me, which is the right choice, and in fact, he's dropped fighters to try to keep me detected. Jimijaz has now sees the plane from the Prince Eugen. Jimijaz puts his plane up so he can see the Prince Eugen. Jimijaz has his hydro running, or he is going to pop his hydro here in just a moment, so that he can detect any torpedoes coming from the Prince Eugen. Here comes the first set, and the second set is going to come right here as well. So the Prince Eugen is essentially doomed because he's committed both sets of torpedoes, which Jimijaz is going to avoid, and Jimijaz is going to finish him off. Now, Jimmy initially started with armor piercing here because the Prince Eugen was quite broadside, but the Prince Eugen is now starting to angle against him. And although the German AP has very high alpha, the penetration angles are quite poor. And so he will continue to fire AP here, although HE probably would have been more effective. He's going to send one set of torpedoes against the Mogami, and he's going to send the next set here on the Prince Eugen. And again, here he's firing AP. He may also have been trying to disable the front guns of the Prince Eugen, but he is able to finish off the Prince Eugen, and the first set of torps he sent on the Mogami are going to miss. Now, Jimmy, I think he realized that the way he executes this isn't quite right. He probably should have made a clockwise turn, although that would have exposed his broadside. But he wants to be able to get his torpedoes off on the other side towards the Mogami. He is going to juke the Mogami here, although the Mogami may have already sent torpedoes, so he may not have had torpedoes on that side. And Jimijaz, I think, is in the heat of the moment. This is what he's thinking. Oh, I want to make a port side turn. But I think at this point he realizes that what he really needs to do is make a starboard turn. He is going to send both sets of torpedoes here. He does have a heel in, but he is going to get finished off by the Mogami, and we're just going to stick with Jimijaz and see what happens with those torpedoes he just sent. Now, we can't see the Mogami because the Mogami is too far away from me, and there's terrain between me and the Mogami, so I can't see him. But Jimijaz lands one torpedo with flooding, and then he is going to land a second torpedo and keep a track of the damage counter in the top right. The Mogami is flooding. And here in just a moment, the Mogami is going to be sunk by the flooding. There he goes. So that leaves 4-on-1, and our team still technically has a lead because, again, we've maintained good cap control for such a long time. You can see that the carrier continues to try to blind drop me. I've dropped into smoke here to try to get in some concealment, but at this point, my only choice is I have to make a charge and try to sink the Bismarck, or at least that was my plan, because the Bismarck was the closest thing I could see, but my torpedoes aren't going to be ready for the next 30 seconds. But as I come out of the smoke, and I'm going to detect the Bismarck, I will also detect the low health Algerie that I mentioned a few times earlier. And I realized this is actually my better chance to be able to save the game, is try to sink the Algerie. Now, my first salvo is right on the money. My second one is not as well aimed. I steady my hand for the last salvo, and I sink the Algerie with seconds remaining, and our team wins on points with the shells coming in from the Algerie. So an exceptionally close match. Jimijaz earns top XP for our team with over 2,000 base XP with a couple of really clutch kills late in the game that made a huge difference. But a really tense match. All three of us were really on the edge of our seats as we were trying to get the win. It kind of looked like we had completely lost it, but this is a good reason to maintain good cap control and to also, never give up hope. You can always get that chance. I did send a compliment to the Algeria player because I think he was a good sport about being, for me having sunk him. But it was a very, very close win indeed. So I'll leave the results up for all of us for you to peruse at your leisure. I earned Solo Warrior out of that, if that wasn't obvious, just to make that clear. So very, very good match, like I said. I hope everybody enjoyed the replay and the commentary. Please do leave your comments below. And as always, we hope to see you out there on the virtual seas, and we wish you happy sailing.